Cannabis. Arguably the most controversial plant in history.
We must wage total war against public enemy number one, the problem of dangerous drugs.
In 1971, the penalties for pot equaled heroin under the Federal Controlled Substances Act.
This plant can do so much for society if we allow it.
It interferes with your short-term memory.
What kept it from happening is the government propaganda was strong.
Just say no.
But today, many states just say yes.
Marijuana is now legal
For many, this division between state and federal laws creates a big problem.
We had in 2019 more marijuana arrests than all violent crime arrests combined.
Too many lives have been upended because of our failed approach to marijuana.
Cannabis is already a big business. As long as there is high market demand, there is always going to be supply.
The older cat's been doing this for 20 or 30 years. I want to be part of society.
This isn't Cheech and Chong's weed. This isn't 1969 weed. This is real, intentional business. We're creating industry here.
At the start of the medical marijuana green rush in California, National Geographic was there, talking to new and old entrepreneurs, all ready to cash in.
10 years ago, I feel like I was in a whole different world. We all had aspirations that this was gonna be it. This is gonna become legal. We were gonna do this right.
So the economics are there in today's market for the grower to be able to afford, you know, 60, 70, 80.
The floodgates opened, compelling many business owners to step out of the, quote, legacy market into the world of legal commerce. Then came the regulators.
It's been a lot tougher than I ever thought it would be. The costs that are associated with running a legitimate business are way more than they are running an illegitimate business.
Cannabis businesses, they're paying about 80% of their revenue to taxes, which basically means you can't make money.
That's what we're dealing with right now is over-regulation, over-taxation. It's killing anyone that has a legal license.
Many of those legal licenses were granted over a decade ago to growers looking to make their fortune in what's known as California's Emerald Triangle. A geographic area made up of 3 counties: Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino. The Emerald Triangle is and was the largest cannabis-producing region in the United States.
I've been growing marijuana for 36 years. Everybody in the industry up here in the outdoor grew in the shadows because there was a strong law enforcement presence. Most of the people in these mountains, the older cats been doing this for 20 or 30 years, they're tired. They've been black sheep. They've been ostracized. They want to come out and be political. They want to speak their pieces. They want to feel good about themselves. They want to be part of society. They never wanted to leave in the first place. We got a headband right there. We got some cherry pie on the other side. We got Blue Dream back here. We've got some purple Urkels. We've got Mr. Nice.
Along with Tim's legal status came the need to prove his organic growing practices.
We're going to sit down with Charlie.
What I'd like to see is a final tally on the amount of medical cannabis that you were able to produce this year.
This is the sweet and sour without the cherry pie in it. I see the different smell. Man, so this is a much different smell than the cherry pie down there.
Just as he would with organic fruits and vegetables, Chris Van Hook inspects marijuana plants for contaminants, mold and mildew, and verifies organic growing methods.
I see that you've got very, very light pest damage. What that tells me is that you're not spraying a heavy synthetic pesticide when I'm gone. This is a real agricultural industry, whether we want to believe it or not.
This is the biggest growth field in America, so there's a place for them to go. Every business in Mendocino would be gone without cannabis.
California was the first to legalize medical marijuana. And for Tim, that meant it was time to stoke the competition.
I'd like to welcome everybody to our 7th annual Emerald Cup.
Tim co-founded a growers event, marijuana style. It took off.
I have back problems.
The path to legalization in the United States began in 1996. That's when California voters rebelled against federal marijuana prohibition by passing the nation's first medical marijuana law, Proposition 215.
How hard is it to get, as the smoke wafts here, it's you know, I won't say that nobody is refused, but let's just say that everybody who needs the protection of Prop 215 deserves to be protected.
Have you ever turned somebody down for a recommendation?
I'm asked that sometimes, and I would have to say, no. And I'm proud of it.
In the early days of the cup, fearful of prosecution, growers and users were afraid to show their faces. Not anymore. As marijuana became more legit, the competition grew as a celebration of the plant. The cannabis farmers of the Emerald Triangle created a community of skilled growers, a craft commodity, and a way of life. Today, the Emerald Cup is still going strong, 19 years and counting, and Tim Blake remains at the helm. Much of the weed grown by Emerald Triangle farmers made its way to statewide medical marijuana dispensaries, places like Harborside Medical Center. National Geographic first met longtime marijuana activist Steve D'Angelo over a decade ago. He was one of the first to become a licensed medical marijuana seller in California. Oakland was ground zero for legal medical cannabis.
We got a couple here. We got some God's Gift, Fuji Kush, Granddaddy Purple Cross. There, yeah, it's got good. Yeah, definitely really frosty.
Okay, so we're here at the front door of Harborside Health Center, and 3 different kinds of people will come through that door: new patients, returning patients, and patients who are bringing us medicine.
It didn't take long for business to boom.
Would you like
Actually, get to splurge a little bit today. Oh, God, that's really, really beautiful.
We are on the main dispensary floor of Harborside Health Center. This is where patients come to view the different types of medicine that we have available and make their selections.
Those 2 there? Does that look good to you?
Harborside was one of the highest business taxpayers in Oakland. At the time, their annual sales were $21 million, paying over $2 million to state sales taxes. D'Angelo became a fixture in marijuana culture, speaking with almost evangelical fervor about the plant, with the bullish enthusiasm of a Wall Street banker. He took his story on the road to share the wisdom with a new crop of investors. Businessmen and women were eager to get on board with growing and expanding medical cannabis laws and all the financial possibilities.
You got a lot of balls you're juggling.
Oh, I knew that already.
All good ones.
We're publishers of medical marijuana magazines around the country. When we started doing this about 18 months ago, we were really a throwaway magazine in dispensaries. We're now distributed in 7-Elevens and a lot of the supermarkets, and people basically line up. They know our distribution dates. It's still a free magazine. They wait for the magazine.
We've become one of the leading providers of insurance to the medical marijuana industry. It's a great business. It's unbelievable, quite frankly. It's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour right now.
It looks like it could be a very profitable business. I mean, once you get around the whole federal law problem, but I think you get the right investors, you can make some money.
Wall Street investors, analysts, insurance brokers, entrepreneurs. They all were lured here by the power of the profit motive.
I'm a retired entrepreneur, and I see this as probably the great next new frontier economically. And I think it's kind of like opening a still about 2 years before Prohibition is repealed. You'd be kind of a fool not to, actually.
All right, great. Well put. I like that.
Thanks.
I like that a lot. The still.
After 37 years as an activist, I can tell you that we have come a long, long way, and it feels really good to be in this room. So thank you.
I think it is the great hope of the medical cannabis industry that every day that goes by, every month that goes by without federal intervention, this industry grows, number of people entering it increases, the number of transactions increases, the number of state regulations increases, and that it becomes increasingly difficult for the feds to come and stop it all.
Living the dreams, man.
But for many entrepreneurs, living the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Prison time aside, federal laws hinder everything from banking to interstate shipping to attracting very big investors. Still, that wasn't enough to deter former Wall Street investment banker Derek Peterson and his business partner, Dar Mann. They were about to up the ante by trying to sell their cannabis supply company, We Grow, to Wall Street.
Well, contribute where you can.
Derek was on familiar turf. Dar was new to high finance. But they were both eager to ring the cannabis bell.
We're going to put a line on the board, pros and cons, and we're going to start hammering it out.
Derek Peterson and Dar Mann met with investment bankers in 2011 to raise money for their cannabis startup and tried to take the private company public.
So the point of getting everybody in the same room today, we're trying to determine whether IPO makes the most sense, or we're trying to determine whether reverse merger makes the most sense.
Do we all agree that an IPO is going to be a minimum of 6 months, 6 months to a year?
Yeah.
Right?
I think we're all favorable of speed here. I mean, that's without a question. But at what cost do we have speed?
Our backers are mainstream Wall Street types, but they're not coming through the entities that they're involved with. They're interested, but they can't get the approval through their board to invest in medical cannabis-related business.
And what's it going to cost? Derek called me, and he goes, I'm starting a new company, and I need to raise some funds. I thought he was crazy first, because I don't smoke marijuana, but we all know there's money in it. I wanted to learn more.
And this is an industry starved for cash. Even banks won't take dispensary deposits.
The federal illegality of medical cannabis is our window of opportunity.
Let's just run through the timeline, and then
It gives us an opportunity to come in without having, the Home Depots of the world come in from a distribution and machinery standpoint, and without having the Philip Morrises of the world come in from a cultivating and distribution standpoint. We have an opportunity here, and that's what's creating the opportunity for us.
And I think that'll put us years ahead of the competition, because no one's going to have a currency that's actually going to be making money as far as... At the end of the day, money motivates a lot of people, and I would be lying if I said that it does not motivate me.
I'm in it for the money and only the money. I want my clients to make money on this, and this is a great opportunity to do it. I could care less if the roads fall apart. I want my clients to make money.
I'm not quite sure I know any other agriculture products that you can sell for $3,500 per pound. Perhaps truffles, but I'm not an expert in truffles.
What kind of valuation? Let's just so I want to hear some numbers before
All right, so let's, we get to a run rate.
I'm asking what's in it for me, but what's in it?
Run rates, reverse mergers, IPOs. this was not the traditional language of marijuana activism.
You know, and what's it going to cost?
Only getting involved in the industry because they want to make a lot of money are premature. Let's remember, it's a psychoactive substance. I don't think that we're going to win the trust of our fellow citizens by coming in and saying, we just want to treat cannabis like any other commodity. We want to have ads for the Super Bowl. We want it to be in the 7-Elevens. We want it to be just like any other product. I don't think that Americans are going to go for that.
All cards on the table, right?
Right.
You know.
There's definitely a concern from old guard to new guard. They see us as a threat. No disrespect to them, but they tipped the domino, if you will. And to have an expectation that other dominoes aren't going to, fall is naive.
Ultimately, the old guard activists were right.
It's business.
Wall Street wasn't quite ready for cannabis the commodity. This happy scene was short-lived. Their business marriage ended in an ugly divorce, complete with a flurry of lawsuits, each accusing the other of fraud, among other charges. Derek continues to navigate the weed business through different companies. Dar pleaded no contest to defrauding Oakland and is now a social media influencer. Today's entrepreneurs have the benefit of hindsight. They also got a boost from the federal government when the United States passed the 2018 Farm Bill. The bill, among other things, made the non-psychoactive compound known as cannabinoid, or CBD, legal for use in health and medical products. Proponents of both CBD and its intoxicating cousin, THC, tout their medical benefits. But for now, the way for CBD is much clearer.
The 2018 Farm Bill just gave a clear, definitive marker between hemp CBD and cannabis THC. It cleaned up a lot of the gray area and ambiguity in the difference between hemp and cannabis. I'm a business leader.
Ruben entered the legal cannabis industry in 2015.
And I was thinking, weed? I'm gonna be able to work in weed and not get in trouble? I started out as an advisor to an investor and then moved into CEO role, which made me one of the first African-American CEOs of a major cannabis company. I got to go to conferences and really see what was missing in this industry. I started speaking up about what we're experiencing, what we're seeing, why we're seeing it, and what the differences were 20 years ago to today, right? This industry is still immature 20 years later.
The industry's growing pains are largely due to the conflict between state and federal law. In 37 states, plus the District of Columbia, medical use is legal. Out of those, 21 allow recreational use. But as far as the federal government is concerned, none of it is legal.
There is high market demand. As long as that demand continues to exist, there is always going to be supply. We've seen that attempts to wipe out that supply under Prohibition have failed. Attempts to completely move that supply into the regulated market have so far failed as well.
A fact that keeps business owners like Ruben in a state of uncertainty.
Once the federal government understands how they get their pound of flesh and they can become willing participants, I think that this industry in this country will be a beautiful thing.
While state cannabis laws change with the times, federal marijuana prohibition keeps law enforcement busy. California still loses ground to illegal marijuana grown by outlaw farmers. The vast majority of pot sales are still underground, where there are no taxes and regulations.
The Napa team secure this trailer, Mendo and probation will secure this trailer, and then we'll have, because you guys have 4, right? We'll have you guys work your way and secure the garden. Okay? And then once
in Mendocino, federal and local law enforcement were preparing to raid an illegal farm.
Don't cut anything until I talk to these people.
When I first started in the early 90s, a good year was 60,000 plants. And now we're over 600,000. So it's exploded.
Just the main thing is be safe and...
Everybody's coming here to grow marijuana. Whether it's the Mexican nationals and the cartels or the people who are growing for commercial use, you know, we're overwhelmed.
Any questions?
At harvest time, a small army of federal, state, and local law enforcement officers deploy.
All right, everybody, round 2 today. The plants out here are a bit bigger than what we had yesterday morning. We're gonna take our time and do a good job, get in, get out safely. No questions? All right, let's get going.
Yank them out and cuff them up. The growers are just like one grain of sand on the beach. You know, there's so many of them that there's really no risk for a lot of the growers. Out here, we have marijuana plants that are growing. Obviously, you could see the immense size of these plants. I'm 5'9", and these plants are obviously, what, about 12 foot tall, 10, 12 foot tall? These plants are monstrously big. Holy cow. So we have here, as you can see, marijuana. You know, these are basically different variations of strands. This one is labeled Danny DeVito. This entire residence is set up to be nothing more than a commercial marijuana growing operation.
To combat illegal farms, the county officials came up with a plan to issue permits with no threat of arrest.
I like the haircut, man. It's right in line. I know. You're gonna work for me.
County Ordinance 931 was created to give medical marijuana growers a legal limit. Pay the fee, stick to the 99 plant maximum, and the local sheriff leaves your product alone.
We're intending to draw a bright line in Mendocino County between legal and maybe legal. And the difference there is legal, where the sheriff is issuing a permit because you're not harming the environment, you're not creating neighborhood community problems. That's pretty much gold-plated. Maybe legal, you go tell it to the judge. The only real solution is to end federal prohibition. Going to the 99 plant permit is really just recognition of reality that marijuana's here, it's not going away. You can pass any law you want. People will ignore that law in the pursuit of profit.
Prior to July, when this program started, what I knew about marijuana was chop it down and haul it to the evidence locker. Okay, so I've learned a lot about...
Sergeant Randy Johnson of the Mendocino Sheriff's Department ran the 931 program.
So we paint you with the broad brush, you paint us with the broad brush. I realize that as part of the way it works. I've met a new group of people here. I've told them, if we work together, I'm not here to try to shut you down. You need to not be here to try to grow as many plants as you can grow. We need to work together if you want this to be successful.
We learned an awful lot about law enforcement. The most important thing we learned was we could trust the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department. That everything you said you would do, you did.
Mendocino County was in the midst of a budget crisis when Sergeant Randy Johnson first made his appeal to marijuana farmers.
We have the potential to have 7 deputies laid off. Okay? And that's how dire the budget is. So, you know what I did? I said, please hold off, because we're going to pay for some of those guys with this program. So, this is going to be the new money. This is going to be the money that says, here's your 7 deputies. So,
Sergeant Johnson hoped to enroll 150 growers in the 931 program and pay for new deputies with the fees.
Just let me ask you this. If this program pays for 7 deputies, what kind of press implications do you think that's going to have?
That'd be awesome. Totally awesome.
So, do you think that's going to move more in your favor of getting stuff legalized? Do you think other counties are going to be recognizing this?
Well, I think they're going to have no problem getting your 150, probably twice or 3 times that amount, because people are now realizing that it's time to come in from the rain and get in here and be legal and do it right.
I check in with sheriff, and you know what? The sheriff trusts me. He goes, I don't know what you're doing, but these people love you. Are you kidding me? I'm giving them a permit to grow marijuana.
With his Emerald Cup as a direct line to the region's growers, Tim Blake took the opportunity to spread the word about the program and bring greater legitimacy to their industry.
Are they going to be inside the law, or are they going to be outside the law? And that line is becoming more defined as we go. There are 7 sheriff jobs that are being lost. We sign up 150 people with the intent to grow. We can in all likelihood save all those jobs. We can be the heroes for these mountains, for the law enforcement. We can show that we really are working together, and we can make this happen. And you guys are all welcome to be part of that, part of this 9.31 program, and part of growing legal, environmentally correct cannabis. So.
The program was short-lived, as new statewide regulations permitting large-scale agricultural cannabis cultivation became law, which left smaller growers who benefited from the 931 program out in the cold. Even as rules and regulations shifted, medical marijuana grower Matt Cohen was just trying to stay legal. And he learned there's a price to pay for going legit.
Any legitimate business out there has to deal with a whole raft of regulations and reporting everything.
It's been a lot tougher than I ever thought it would be. So we have planning and building department, wheelchair accessibility issues we're dealing with. I have human resources issues with employees threatening to, sue if they get fired. We have workman's comp costs, insurance costs, payroll taxes, sales taxes, district taxes. It goes on and on and on. The costs that are associated with running a legitimate business are way more than they are running an illegitimate business.
Marijuana is now legal
And then came Proposition 64, cracking open the legal playing field to include adult recreational use. Cannabis was now fully legal in California.
40 million more Americans now live in a state without marijuana prohibition.
For many, it was the next logical step, though a troubled one.
Everything changed when we saw the implementation of Prop 64, which has really been an unmitigated disaster. And there's 3 main reasons. The first is overtaxation, the second is overregulation, and the third is a complete failure to integrate the legacy cannabis market into the legal market.
It's unfortunate that in one of the biggest economies in the world that learning curve has been so steep in terms of what not to do when it comes to things like business licensing and placing regulatory burdens on them.
It's very interesting to see what's happening now with cannabis regulation across the country, because the states actually really are functioning as laboratories of democracy.
As public opinion shift and more voters engage in legalization efforts, states like New York are building on California's example by including social justice in the conversation from the very start.
We'll work with the state to legalize marijuana the right way by expunging arrest records.
New York entered the cannabis space very intentionally in a way to try to avoid many of these problems, and also with a very clear focus on empowering disenfranchised communities and repairing the harms caused by prohibition. They did so very intentionally and are moving forward with those values and focuses in mind.
And all I can think of right now is pizza.
Because New York is such a big state and because it's an East Coast state, people are going to be watching it very closely to see how effective that intentionality ends up being.
And making sure the grassroots, not the big corporations, run this new business.
California's Prop 64 may be seen as a cautionary tale for other state lawmakers. But for California's growers, the struggle to grow a profitable business continues.
I have been living and breathing cannabis since I was in middle school and high school on the traditional side. I started at Harborside in 2008, and I worked there for about 13 years before I decided that farming was really where I was going to go.
Danny's passion brought her to Agris Farms in California's Sacramento Valley.
So here at Agris, we cultivate around 8,000 to 10,000 pounds roughly, and that's of flowered material ready to go. Yolo County makes it so that we are capped at 1 acre. I cannot grow above an acre, which then limits me to a kind of more of a smallish farm, and I'm unable to compete with the larger MSO farms and the big farms that are producing 40,000 pounds a year, if not more.
MSO means multi-state operator. Larger farms owned by larger companies. Agris Farms grows a craft cannabis, meaning it is a small batch producer emphasizing growing technique and genetics with extreme daily attention. Each cannabis variety is chosen by Danny.
There's a lot of different strains. For me, it's really important to be on top of what the market wants. That is one of the criteria that I look at of when I'm bringing in genetics to the farm.
The best genetics in the world won't matter if no one is buying.
The fact that the customer is paying anywhere between 20 to 36% in tax, what other industry do you pay for that? I mean, alcohol's not taxed that way. Cigarettes are not taxed that way. That's going to push everything back to the black market and to the traditional market, and that's what we're dealing with right now is over-regulation, over-taxation, and it's killing anyone that has a legal license, and that's trying to at least do this correctly.
A cannabis grower, licensed or unlicensed, doesn't have access to the federal subsidies of a traditional farm unless they are growing hemp. And then there's old-fashioned capitalism.
Once federal legalization happens, once federal banking goes over, now we've got the real big money for the green rush. Right now we've got multi-state operators, they're big, they're not money. That money will come in, and we don't have access to that money. So for us, it's survival. I just hope that there's a place for us legacy and small craft people once that happens.
Drafting state and national laws, if prohibition is lifted, will be complicated.
Many states are looking at California and trying to see what not to do and what they can do better so that they don't kind of find themselves in the spot that we're in 10 years from now.
Anticipating the end of federal prohibition, one company in particular took an unprecedented gamble nearly a decade ago. In 2013, Scott's Miracle-Gro, a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, began their first investments in cannabis cultivation through their subsidiary, Hawthorne Gardening Company.
My father, Jim, was asked a question, would you consider getting into the sort of emerging cannabis industry? And what he said then, again in a public interview, which was not something the board wanted to hear, was absolutely, people are growing plants. We are in the business of helping people grow plants. Why would we not?
But as a U.S. company, they had a problem. Because of conflicting state and federal laws, existing Miracle-Gro research facilities can only grow proxy crops, such as tomatoes or hemp, which only simulates marijuana to a point. The solution? Open a research facility in Canada.
The point for building the facility up here is that in Canada, because it's completely legal recreationally and medicinally, they were able to start doing that research up here. There's a lot of similarities between hemp and THC, but being able to actually work with a THC plant is obviously much more representative.
We figured, look, let's start Hawthorne off as kind of an incubator within the larger company and try to focus on things that we just, for whatever reason, aren't doing well and see if we can get them up to speed.
That focus is hydroponics, a horticultural method without soil that grows crops directly in nutrient-rich water, often using highly controlled lighting indoors. The researchers test lighting and nutrients, driving growth to the THC-rich flower. Levels are measured, and the work is repeated.
We would never launch a tomato food in every Home Depot in the country if we hadn't tested it extensively on tomatoes, make sure it works right. That's exactly what we were doing in Hawthorne. It's what we were forced to do because we can't grow cannabis here in the US as a publicly traded company.
It's just one of the many challenges facing the U.S. cannabis industry. And then there's the financing. Only a few hundred banks and credit unions will work with a cannabis business.
When you don't have that availability of capital, that means that, in particular, small businesses or traditionally disenfranchised communities are unable to really get a solid foothold in the industry. A vast majority of the cannabis industry is unbanked, and some of them are forced to operate entirely in cash, which makes them targets for criminals. Sometimes it's impossible for them to find payroll companies. If they don't have a paper trail for their income, employees won't be able to get house loans or car loans or things like that. So there's a huge trickle-down effect.
Banking and taxation are the two financial issues that challenge the industry.
Cannabis right now is taxed under the 280E tax code, which basically says if you're a federally illegal business, if you're a criminal, but you're making a profit, you still owe federal income tax. It goes all the way back to Al Capone and how they nailed him on tax evasion. A business like Hawthorne, we deduct everything a normal business would: payroll, rent, insurance, so on and so forth. And that gets us to an effective tax rate between 25 and 30%, like most businesses. Cannabis businesses, because they can't deduct those expenses, means they're paying about 80% of their revenue to taxes, which basically means you can't make money. Even if you have what should otherwise be a really profitable business, the single biggest beneficiary here is the IRS.
It's clear now, after decades of evidence, that the federal cannabis prohibition has failed.
Anything that has been illegal and vilified for as long as cannabis will have victims left in its wake. Both financial and criminal.
Some of these occur under state law and some of these occur under federal law. There's really a whole constellation of policies that punish people for using a substance that's safer than alcohol. We have to, as a society, make an attempt to make up for and repair those harms.
As many states change their marijuana laws, getting cannabis offenders out of jail and records expunged has become a priority for activists. Steve D'Angelo now takes his activism to Washington, D.C.
I stepped down as CEO of Harborside and launched an organization called the Last Prisoner Project in 2019. We worked to get prisoners released.
At one time, I didn't think I was going to ever get out.
We are dedicated to making sure that as we build this legal industry around the world, that we also make sure that people who are in prison for doing exactly the same thing are not left out and are given an opportunity to rebuild their lives.
In 2022, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, MORE, designed to end federal prohibition and lay the groundwork to erase criminal records for cannabis offenses. The sweeping bill would have removed marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act and started a process to expunge cannabis convictions, to right the wrongs of the failed war on drugs.
You would think that when a society decides that the thing that used to be illegal is now going to be legal, that we would stop punishing people for the thing that's not wrong anymore.
I'm not looking to be a torchbearer.
Ruben Lindo is also passionate about prison reform, especially former convicts caught up in the penal system for nonviolent drug offenses.
We're going to start to learn what the impacts were generationally in this failed war on drugs just by helping people get their records expunged. I'm not talking about all drugs are good. I'm just talking about specifically the green plant, cannabis. Think about this. A 17-year-old kid in 2014 gets arrested for unlawful possession of marijuana, which is a violation of a penal code, takes a conviction on that, or even a no contest. His family can no longer live in public housing. He's not eligible for TAP and Pell Grants to go to college. Wait a minute, wait. So you're telling me a kid who got caught with weed can't go to college?
Tens of thousands of men and women remain incarcerated on marijuana-related charges. Users, growers, and dealers alike. On October 6, 2022, President Biden took a step toward his campaign promise to decriminalize marijuana.
I'm announcing a pardon for all prior federal offenses for the simple possession of marijuana. I'm calling on all governors to do the same for state marijuana possession offenses. Too many lives.
Some cannabis activists say that this is a step in the right direction.
It's time that we right these wrongs. No one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana.
Still, many say the policy and the president don't go far enough.
Hey, ho, ho, the drug war has got to go. Hey, ho, ho, the drug war has got to go.
I'm here today because it's important that we get our friends, our family, our comrades out of jail for cannabis offenses. I'm here today to voice the frustration.
And demand the release of the thousands still in prison, still with records, withheld access to opportunity and basic human rights, suffering from cannabis prohibition.
And the public wants real. We don't want fake. We don't want no malarkey. So please.
Really quick. The president was very clear. He was explicit. He said it in a nationally televised debate, speaking directly to voters. Everybody gets out. Records expunged. He didn't qualify it. He didn't say it applied only to simple possession. And we want the president to keep his promise.
When I say what's the call, you say free them all. What's the call? Free them all. What's the call? Free them all. What's the call?
The president can free federal cannabis prisoners, but tens of thousands remain jailed by states and municipalities.
Today, you look at some of my friends who are getting out of prison. That would not have happened if states like Illinois and New York, which have passed cannabis legalization not by initiative, but by the state legislatures.
This is primarily an issue of justice and freedom. Freedom to be able to consume a relatively non-toxic plant in the privacy and safety of your own home. When you look at it through this lens, then you start to see what is most important about the efforts to legalize cannabis. Money and tax revenue and creating jobs and opportunity, those are wonderful additions to it. But at very base, this is about justice and personal freedom.